In football, underdog stories are rare, but Nottingham Forest's journey is on another level. Imagine a club that was struggling in the lower divisions, barely making headlines, suddenly rising to become back-to-back champions of Europe. It sounds impossible, right? But that's exactly what Nottingham Forest did. How did a team that once flirted with third division football rise to take down Europe's biggest clubs? How did they conquer Liverpool, Real Madrid, and Hamburg on the way to 2 consecutive Champions League victories? And more importantly, could they rise again? Led by the legendary Brian Clough, Nottingham Forest rewrote football history between 1977 and 1980. They climbed from the second division to the English First Division title in just 3 years, then shocked the world by winning the European Cup twice, an achievement that still feels unreal. But the story doesn't end there. Decades after their downfall, Forest is back in the Premier League. And with Nuno Espirito Santo now leading the charge, some fans are asking, could this legendary club reclaim its former glory? This is the epic tale of Nottingham Forest, the greatest underdog story in football history. Nottingham Forest before Clough. Before Nottingham Forest became a footballing powerhouse, they were a club stuck in mediocrity. The 1960s and early 70s were a period of decline, a time when the club had no real direction, no ambition, and no hope of challenging England's best. Forest had once enjoyed a brief moment of success, winning the FA Cup in 1959, but that was ancient history. By the early 1970s, they were battling for survival in the second division. Fans were frustrated, managers came and went, and the club was slowly fading into irrelevance. A club in crisis. The 1971-72 season was a disaster. Forest finished 16th in the second division, dangerously close to relegation to the third tier of English football. Attendances dropped, financial struggles mounted, and the club had no clear plan for the future. At this point, Nottingham Forest wasn't a club that people feared, it was a club that people had forgotten. The turning point. A legend arrives. Then, in January 1975, everything changed. A man known for his fearless personality, sharp wit, and revolutionary footballing mind arrived at the club. His name, Brian Clough. Clough had recently been sacked by Leeds United after a disastrous 44-day reign, where he clashed with players and management. Many believed his career at the top level was finished, but they were wrong. Because what Clough was about to do at Nottingham Forest would change football forever. The Clough Revolution. When Brian Clough walked through the doors of Nottingham Forest in January 1975, the club was in shambles. But Clough wasn't here to settle for mediocrity, he was here to win. Many doubted him. After all, his last job at Leeds United ended in disaster after just 44 days. He had publicly criticized Leeds' style of play, clashed with the players, and was unceremoniously sacked. People thought his career was finished. But Clough wasn't just any manager, he was a visionary. And at Nottingham Forest, he found the perfect stage to prove it. Mentality shift, Clough's immediate impact. The first thing Clough changed wasn't the squad, it was the mentality. He demanded respect, discipline, and absolute belief in his system. Players who didn't buy into his methods were out. He rebuilt the team's confidence, instilled a winning culture, and made it clear. Nottingham Forest would no longer be an afterthought. Building a championship winning squad. Clough wasn't just a motivator, he was a tactical genius. But he knew he needed quality players to make his vision work. Over the next few seasons, he transformed the squad, bringing in Peter Shilton, one of England's greatest goalkeepers, John Robertson, a creative winger who became the team's key playmaker, Kenny Burns, a defender-turned-striker-turned-defender who became a vital part of Clough's system. These weren't just good players, they were winners, from second division to champions of England. By the 1976-77 season, Forest secured promotion to the first division. But what happened next was unbelievable. In their first season back in the top flight, 1977-78, Clough's Nottingham Forest won the First Division title, finishing above Liverpool, Manchester United, and Arsenal. Let that sink in. A newly promoted team just won the English League in their first season back. It was a footballing miracle, but Clough wasn't done yet, because that league title earned them a place in the European Cup, now known as the UEFA Champions League. And what they were about to do next would shock the world. Back-to-back European glory. Winning the first division title in 1978 was already a miracle. But Nottingham Forest's fairy tale wasn't over. They had qualified for the European Cup, now the UEFA Champions League, a competition dominated by giants like Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, and Liverpool. Most people thought Forest wouldn't last long in Europe. After all, they were newcomers to the big stage. But Brian Clough had a different plan. They weren't just there to compete, they were there to win. 1978-79, Forest stunned Europe. Nottingham Forest entered the 1978-79 European Cup as complete outsiders. They took down defending champions Liverpool in the first round, an early sign that this team was different. Forest fought their way to the final, where they faced Malmö FF. The match wasn't a spectacle, it was a gritty battle. But in the 45th minute, Forest's record-signing Trevor Francis scored with a diving header. Final score, Nottingham Forest 1-0 Malmö. Against all odds, Nottingham Forest were champions of Europe. 1979-80, defending the title. Winning the European Cup once was unbelievable. Winning it again, almost impossible. But Forest didn't care about odds. They marched through the 1979-80 tournament, defeating Dynamo Berlin, Ajax, and Hamburg on their way to the final. Their opponent? Hamburg, featuring Kevin Keegan, one of the best players in the world. Hamburg were the favorites, but Clough had built a team that thrived under pressure. In the 20th minute, John Robertson cut inside and fired a low shot past the keeper. 1-0 Forest. For the next 70 minutes, Forest defended with their lives. Every tackle, every block, and every save from Peter Shilton brought them closer to history. When the final whistle blew, it was official. Nottingham Forest had won back-to-back European Cups. A club like no other. Nottingham Forest had achieved something no English club had ever done before. They had more European Cups, 2, than domestic league titles, 1, a stat that still baffles football fans to this day. They had conquered England. They had conquered Europe. But as quickly as they rose, they were about to fall. The decline and fall from grace. Nottingham Forest had reached the pinnacle of European football, but maintaining success is often harder than achieving it. The club's golden era didn't last forever. Key players leave the beginning of the end. Success attracts attention, and soon, Forest's key players moved on. Trevor Francis, Peter Shilton, and other stars left for bigger clubs, and replacing them was impossible. Clough's magic had built a dynasty from nothing, but even he couldn't fight against time. The squad weakened, performances dropped, and within a few years, Nottingham Forest was no longer a European powerhouse. The final blow, relegation, and Clough's departure. By the early 1990s, Forest was a mid-table club, struggling to keep up in the newly formed Premier League. Then, in 1993, the unthinkable happened. Forest was relegated. Brian Clough, the man who had built an empire from the ground up, stepped down after 18 years in charge. It was the end of an era. Forest would spend the next 23 years outside the Premier League, bouncing between the Championship and League One, a shadow of the club that once ruled Europe. But football is full of surprises, and Nottingham Forest wasn't finished yet. Can Forest rise again? After 23 years in exile, Nottingham Forest made their long-awaited return to the Premier League in 2022. For a generation of fans, it was their first time seeing Forest compete at the top level. But survival isn't enough. Can they rise again? Now, with Nuno Espirito Santo at the helm, Forest has a chance to rebuild. With smart recruitment, tactical discipline, and the fearless underdog spirit that defined them under Brian Clough, could they one day challenge for European spots again? It won't be easy, but if history has taught us anything, it's that Nottingham Forest thrives on proving people wrong. Nottingham Forest's story is one of football's greatest fairy tales. From near obscurity to back-to-back European champions, their rise was nothing short of legendary. But history isn't just about the past, it's about the future too. With Nuno Espirito Santo now leading the club, can Nottingham Forest rise again? Can they bring back the fearless underdog spirit that made them great? Football is unpredictable. The Premier League is ruthless. But one thing is certain, this club has defied the odds before, and they could do it again. What do you think? Drop a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic football stories.